Now, before we go any further, of course, I want to do a bit of a shout out. I want to say a big thank you and a big shout out to JCMS Meta Monday, the man, the myth, the legend that puts all of the stats together, that makes this possible. And there's a link to the Meta Monday down in the description. So if you want to go and check out the data and the stats and all that kind of good stuff, then please do so. And of course, he has a Patreon and all that kind of good stuff. And if you enjoy this kind of thing and you want to support this kind of meta analysis that is made possible by what JCMS does, then please consider checking out his Patreon and signing up, because he's a good lad and he does a good work. And also, he's a guard player, so he's one of us. My, ain't it a beautiful sight? Genius and Occult. Once the inheritors of the meta, once the scourge, talked about by many complaining longbeards. Seems like the day of Ascension isn't nigh, does it, boys? Now, I own Genius and Occult. I own Genius and Occult, and I have to say that it is actually sad seeing them down here. Bear in mind, we have got a lot less players. Last week we had 800 players. This week we've only got like 551, so take that into account. But even so, fucking 5 players. That's the same as Deathwatch. And we know that Deathwatch are basically a dead faction at this point. 5 players with 8 wins between them out of 27 games means that there is only a 30% win rate. That this is going to be a bit of an anomaly, a bit of a blip. And I wouldn't be surprised if Genius and Occult fluctuate all over the place. I think what we'll see with Genius and Occult is they'll go up and down a bit, because you'll have some people that just, oh, fuck it, I'll take my, I've just completed my GSC army. I'll go to my local GT. Oh, I got smashed in because it's my first time experiencing competitive 40k and the game's on like a different level. And then, next week, you'll have people who are like maining GSC, who will never give up on the day of Ascension, and they'll go and they'll smash it. They'll go 3-2, 4-1. They'll do really, really well. And suddenly the win rate will be back up in the 40%. I don't think their win rate is necessarily going to be a good indication. It might stay down low, but I think it could, in its death throes, in the twitches, in the death twitches, it might go up and down a bit. But here's the thing: their player numbers are very, very low, and I think that is more of an indication of the faction health, and it's not healthy. It ain't looking good. It's like that dude from the Killzone trailer who's like, getting like the mask, put on his face. That's what it's like. In a similar boat, we have Deathwatch. Everything that I said about Deathwatch last week kind of still applies now. I would say, interestingly, Deathwatch are in a worse position than GSC. I think that GSC are in the death throes, but there's still a little bit of twitching of life in there. Like I said, I still think we'll see the win rate go up a bit. Deathwatch are at the bottom, and they're going to stay at the bottom. And that's because their corpse has stopped twitching. They're going to need more than an adrenaline shot to the heart. They're going to need a brain. They're going to have their brain transplanted into a whole new body in order for them to come back from the dead at this point. It's a shame. Their win rate has been low for a while now. Look at this. And I don't think Orcs will stay in the bottom 3 completely. But I don't think Orcs will get into the top half consistently. Big issue with Orcs. Look, they've got decent player numbers, 21 players, nothing to sniff at. If we go through, that is, not bottom, but not top. Similar, same to Chaos Space Marines. There's a few. It's a quieter week this week, so I think Necrons have got the most. But last week Necrons had like 80 players. Now we're down to like 50, right? Now, being honest, I think this is a temporary blip. I think we'll see Orcs go up a little bit. It won't go up a lot a bit. The reason for this is, as we said last week, people are figuring Orcs out. If you've only got one tactic, the longer your faction goes without a codex, without change, the lower the win rate becomes. So you can have a codex that doesn't change very much, but as long as you've got lots of variety in play styles, you'll be fine, because it's difficult for people to know exactly what to do against you. If one time, with Guard, for example, one time they play Mech Guard, one time they play Infantry Guard, one time they play Tank Guard, one time they play Artillery Guard. All of those different games require different play styles, and so you have to have a lot of experience against Guard to be able to defeat all the different play styles, or to have experience against all the different play styles. Orcs have one tactic. We said this last week. They have one tactic: pressure. The other big issue, though, and there is another factor here, which I think is very, very important to acknowledge: Custodes are a really, really hard matchup for Orcs. Really hard. Interestingly, the current Custodes tactics seem to be infantry spam, which I don't know, boys. Ship me off to the black ships. Get me ready to touch the Emperor's throne, because I said maybe the only if all your vehicles are overcosted, maybe your only choice is to go infantry spam and just try and hold on to primary. And wouldn't you fucking know it, that's what Custodes players are doing now. I think advanced Orc tactics still work, but the basic run at them and chop them up, lads, that ain't working so good no more. Dark Angels last week were doing really, really well, and this week they're now down here with 41%. I think this week is one of those weird weeks where everything, you get this every so often where the world kind of turns on its head, but some factions don't do as well in the quieter weeks. Dark Angels going from like 50% to 41%, I think is kind of an indication that the Dark Angels community is kind of just trying some things out, and this was a little bit of an off week. Last week, we saw loads of people using the Iron Storm Spearhead, and Dark Angels had a 50% win rate. And actually, we've got most people using the Unforgiven Task Force and the Gladius Task Force. Problem that these players had is that they were operating under the misconception that Dark Angels were allowed to be an interesting faction, and that you would want to play your Dark Angels as Dark Angels and not as Green Iron Hands. I mean, it's an easy mistake to make. You would think that you would want your Dark Angels to be Dark Angels. It unfortunately seems like Dark Angels are it's Green Iron Hands this time, which makes them a little uninteresting. Likewise, we move over to the Blood Angels here. You can see a similar thing has happened. This week, we've seen lots of people under the mistaken impression that they need to play their Blood Angels as Blood Angels, and it's not done bad. It's not done badly, but it's not done great. It almost looks like, and if I was looking at these stats independently, just on their own, it almost looks like it doesn't really matter what Blood Angels army you go for, because they've all got 40% win rate. They've all got 40%. Like, Blood Angel players are like, they're trying everything. They're trying Gladius, they're trying Ironstorm, they're trying Sons of Grenadiers, they're trying Phasm Assault Force, they're trying everything, and whatever they try, it comes out to 40%. It looks okay though. Low 40s is, well, it doesn't look okay. Low 40s is obviously not ideal. We've seen Blood Angels they got a boost to their army rule. They got like extra attacks and stuff, and we've seen a lot of people go back over to playing Blood Angels in a traditional manner. Now, obviously, when people do that, it's going to take them a week or so to figure out the new combos, the new tactics. I mean, especially if you've got Blood Angels and you've been like on a bit of a roll with the Ironstorm, you've got to kind of like reprogram your brain. And so there's two things that I predict will happen. We will see people stick with Sons of Sanguinius, and the win rate will start going up a bit because they start figuring out and sharing what works, and then, the net lists start coming in, which is cool. Or we will see people drop off Sons of Sanguinius and start going back over to things like the Ironstorm, which we know are tried and true and tested. We have the Astra Militarum, his Imperial Guard, the Emperor's true fighters. Yes! Now, Guard have got really, really high player numbers. There's actually more people this week, 33 might not seem like a lot. Remember, it's a quieter week. We've got almost half the players we had last week. So 33 is pretty good. We are the 3rd most played faction. Now, how does a faction lose 10% win rate in 1 week? Well, one, it could be a bit of an anomaly. But you don't tend to find it to be so anomalous with high player numbers. And so I feel like Guard are a faction which you don't need to be a fucking genius to run them. They're not a high skilled army, they're just a high practice army. I could be wrong. So what I see here is quite high player numbers, and it probably represents that there are a lot of people that are just starting that journey. They're not doing anything wrong. I'm not lambasting these people in any way. I'm not saying they're bad players at all, not even slightly. What I think we're going to see is Guard player numbers be quite high. And I think we'll see the number of players that are either winning tournaments or going like 4-1 with them remain quite high. But I think we'll see the win rate remain low for a little bit, and then it'll start, or it'll start climbing up like incrementally. Okay, that's what I think we'll see. We may see the Guard win rate fluctuate a lot, where we have busy weeks where we have some really, really good players smashing it and getting us up into the 50s, and then we might have quiet weeks where we see people, it's quiet week where maybe those experienced players are taking a weekend off before they go to the next tournament. Because if you get enough experienced players going at the same time to a big event, that's all, everyone's going to like LVO, you'll see numbers go up and numbers go down, right? So I think what we'll see with Guard is when we've got the people that are smashing it with them attending, the win rate will go up. And when we see people that are just starting their journey or beginning to take a look at what the fuck this faction is, or maybe dusting the models after a little bit of time on the shelf, we'll see the win rate go down a little. I don't know if Guard is S tier. I think in the right hands they can be extremely powerful. I think unfortunately for Games Workshop, that makes it very tricky for them to balance it. Because how do you balance player experience? Do you bother, or do you just look at the top shit and take it around the chemical sheds? Tyranids are similar position to last time, low 40% win rate, and I don't expect that to change radically over the. Well, I don't expect that to change radically for a while. Not without some serious shakeups on the Tyranid line. Tyranids are by and large, I think they're figured out. We've seen people try out Vanguard. We've seen people try out Unending Swarm. And people are just still going for Invasion Fleet. But I think by and large, Tyranids have been thoroughly tested, and the general consensus is it's the Invasion Fleet. If something comes along that hugely nerfs vehicles and monsters, I suspect Ninja will start doing a lot better. Next up, we've got Imperial Knights. Decent player numbers with the Knights, surprisingly high, and they got 40 wins, and they had 40 wins out of 90 games. One player went the distance with them, and they had a 44% win rate. Interestingly, apparently the player that got the 4-1, or I'm not sure if he won an event, but the player that did really, really well had 3 big Knights. And that's something I did not expect to see. 3 big Knights. I think that Imperial Knights are in a little bit of flux right now. The flux isn't changing anything, but some of the bigger Knights went down in points, and we're seeing some people try them out. I suspect we're still going to see majority of the Knights being the smaller ones. I think we'll see a few big ones getting tried out here and there. They're a bit of a funny one to analyze, because fundamentally, addition in, addition out, Knights are a stat check. Do you have enough anti-tank? You beat them. You don't have enough anti-tank? You don't beat them. My. That. Not something you see every day. Not something you see every day at all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Eldar are now officially, this week at least, in the bottom half of factions. Spicy. It seems like the time of the Eldar is over. And I imagine that makes a lot of people very, very happy. I think that it's one of those weeks where everything's all over the place, slightly less numbers, slightly... I don't think the tournaments are quite as big, although I could be talking bollocks. Let me just have a quick look. The biggest tournament this week was 104 players, whereas last week it was much higher than that. So it's a quieter week, so we're getting some weird results. But that's not to say this is a completely unprecedented result. Eldar are on the decline, as they should be, according to their lore, but they are on the decline. I think Eldar have been fairly well reined in now, but they're still very, very strong. Do not let this result fool you, and do not underestimate them. To underestimate the Eldar, you do at your own peril. And what's interesting is they weren't auto win for a while, so they were kind of auto win when they first dropped. I do suspect this will go up a bit. I do. I expect this will fluctuate for a little while, but I think the main takeaway is that Eldar are not the boogeyman that they once were. After Eldar, we have Space Marines, which a bit like Tyranids, they're kind of settled in many ways. You base Space Marines, mid 40%, mid 45%. Some detachments up a bit. I mean, Stormlance is really dragging the team down, but there was only 2 players with it. But some detachments up a bit, some detachments down a bit. The thing with Space Marines that I find most interesting about them is the variety. 2 weeks in a row with Space Marines now, we've seen a lot of different people, a lot of different detachments in play. A lot of people say that basic Space Marines are kind of rubbish. And the issue with the basic Space Marines is that, well, if you could just take not basic Space Marines, you could take the Codex uncompliant or divergent chapters, the way they call it, and just get everything you get from the Space Marines and then extra rules. And that is true. Clearly it doesn't help everyone, because it's not helping the Blood Angels as much, it's not helping the Dark Angels this week, and it's not doing diddly dick for Deathwatch. But I do understand that some people say that there are just better ways of running Marines by just going Codex Divergent. Space Marines are kind of in the perfect spot right now. Try a bit of Gladius and you'll do alright. You try a bit of Vanguard and you'll do alright. You try a bit, you like tanks, look and go for it. You like moving fast and stuff, go for it. This is the second week when we've seen people try and Firestorm though, and yet it's the second week they've only had 43% win rate. Alright, next up we've got Chaos Space Marine, yes! As Warforged has the best faction! This is the second week in a row where we have seen fairly consistent Chaos Marine numbers and Chaos Marine win rates. If you keep adding zeros onto the end of the Forge Fiend's points cost, and then you basically change the Nurgle strat, then it's kind of fixed the faction. And that's my take on Chaos Space Marines, is they seem to have fixed them, where they've got an okay win rate. Clearly, you can still go the distance with them. Clearly. My experience with Chaos Space Marines is everyone seems to take the same shit. Still. Like, everyone still goes for that giant Abaddon blob. And I don't get it, because the giant Abaddon blob's like 700 or 800 points. It's wildly expensive for 10 Terminators. I mean, they're good. They're 10 very good Terminators, led by a big force multiplier. But it is still, like, what, 40% of your points? I mean, no one is out here. No one's out here telling guard players. That would be like putting double Doomhammer in your list, you know. Space Wolves are doing Space Wolf things. They, you know, they're one-dimensional. There's like one dude who's only just started playing, who's learning with the Gladius Task Force. There's 2 dudes that were like, oh shit, I put the wrong detachment in. I thought that Ironstorm was an auto win, and then there's everyone else that has worked out that the Stormlance is best. A Stormlance works well with Space Wolves because of how cheap Thunderwolf Cavalry are. Space Wolves are if you want combat Marines, Space Wolves are great for it. They're fast. They've got loads of choppy units. It feels right. I mean, it feels right. Space Wolves is running at you and chopping to pieces. That's what they should do. So Space Wolves are fast and they're choppy. Storm Lands perfectly feeds into that. They've got loads of cavalry. They've got loads of jump units. Yeah. Really, really good. So yeah, Space Wolves are fairly settled, fairly unlocked. Go combat with them. Your combat faction, pump that combat power up by going Stormlands. Simples. Votann doing what Votann do. Last week they were pretty high. This week they've dropped down a little bit. Votann, they always fluctuate a little bit because it kind of depends on the matchups that they get. Because some matchups are really good for them because the enemy turns up with just like 4 really good units, and the Votann go, well, guess what? I can delete 4 units. Most excellent. But then if they come across like hordes or something, they can struggle a little bit. What I really like about this is the player numbers. I'm seeing Votann numbers even on quiet weeks be pretty good. Not great, not terrible. They're slowly climbing up. People's Panzer, Votann Terminator, Trash Catan. Interesting. Good to know. Good to know. Makes sense at the end of the day. They can spam a shitload of those plasma and like mortal wound things, can't they? So they get past the half damage because it's all 1 damage. They get past the invulnerable saves. So when a bunch of Votann Terminators unload with all of their shenanigans into a unit of into a Catan, that Catan is just on a 5-up save. Leagues of Votann are starting to see more play because they are anti-Necron, and I also suspect that we're starting to see some the player base mature a little bit and see more people pick them up because they think they're cool and not just. Now, last week was a bit of a blip. Chaos Demons were at the top last week. Now, are they in the top half? Let's have a look. Out of 26 factions, they've just snuck into the top half. Chaos Demons are good. 49% win rate. They're gonna go up again. The change to demons really fixed one of their issues, which was their number one tactic is distract you with 4 big monsters whilst the little stuff runs around and scores. And now that the Great and Clean one is good, it's added another tool in the toolbox for them. And now they got all their points like slashed across the board. The Adeptus Custodes! Yes! Ah, Custodes. It was nice when you weren't a thing, but now that you're back, I guess it'll do. Now, what's really interesting about these, again, this is the interesting number, the number of players that went the distance. So many people jumping back onto Custodes. So many games being won, yet so few people going 4-1 or 5-0. So few. Now, that could be because a lot of people have jumped back onto them, but I feel like Custodes are a 3-2 faction. So I've heard that Custodes players are literally going pure infantry, walking onto objectives, and winning. That's how they win. They just sit on 3 objectives. They get more primary than everyone else, and when their secondaries come up, I don't know if they're taking fixed. They might be taking fixed. But they are playing the game of standing on circles. They're always going to be part of the meta because even going pure infantry Custodes, they're relatively cheap, and they're relatively cheap money wise, and they've got a surprisingly good second-hand market, and they're super fucking cheap to paint. There's one army that I could paint in a week, like a full army in a week, 2,000 points. It would be Custodes. Retributor, Northern Oil. List submitted for a good rating, sir. List is Doomhammer that won an RTT. Fucking Doomhammers. It's Doomhammers, man. I'm only taking the piss. Let's have a look. Demolisher Spam. Nice. Very, very retro. Very 9th edition. And 8th edition. And probably 10th edition. Every edition, right? Lord Soul Leontas, Platoon Command Squad, Regimental Engineer, Tank Commander. Tank Commander, both Tank Commanders with multi-melters, las cannons, Demolisher Cannons. And got 1 unit of Caden Shock Troops inside a Chimera, Fulgrim, Doomhammer, Heavy Weapon with las cannons, Heavy Weapons with las cannons, Demolisher, Demolisher, Sentinel, Sentinel, Scions. Okay, yeah, so that's what we call a firepower list. that is the kind of list that will blow people off the table, and depending on the terrain that you're likely to encounter, if your boards are not like super dense, if they're more like UKTC, if they're not UKTC or WTC, and that, you know, they're just like normal bespoke kind of terrain, like just a couple of old ruins, a couple of forests, stuff like that, then that'll do really, really well, because it's just a huge amount of firepower. All those tank commanders, all those demolisher tanks. The issue you will encounter with that list, 110%, will be if you play on dense terrain. If you play, even, I mean, maybe even GW terrain, although that's what you may have played on, but especially on dense terrain like the UKTC and the WTC, you will really struggle with that, because you've got no indirect fire. So the thing with a lot of the terrain that we play, I play on, is it's a lot of line of sight blocking, like L-shaped ruins and stuff. Direct fire weapons are actually not that helpful, because you just can't see. And things like doom hammers, sometimes the terrain can be so dense you can't move out of the deployment zone. So I've literally, you know, one of the most common terrain formats in the UK is UKTC, and you can't get a land radar out of your deployment zone. It's too dense. Pure firepower will win games in the right circumstances. It smashes it on player place terrain. Really, really effective, and it's absolutely the right move you should do when you're playing. You know, when you're playing on more open terrain. I do strongly feel like this list will really, really struggle if it plays on a dense terrain map. Yeah, I've been lucky so far. Just been WTC terrain everywhere around my area. So WTC terrain is normally very, very dense. Like very, very dense. There are light boards. Yeah, so if you look, round 1, table 1, 2, 3, 4, but that's just like round 1, that's just hammer and anvil, and then you've got round 1 again, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then so there's like 8. Yeah, man, Carl Davies, maybe you are the exception that proves the rule, but I have no idea how you have been getting you've been getting away on these tables with no indirect fire. Are you sure it's Are you sure it's WTC? Carl, I feel like it might not be. Because that's what it's all like. Look at how fucking... Look, yeah, like, if you look at this, you can't physically get your Doom Hammer out of your deployment zone. Look, can't fit through that gap. Trust me, I've tried. Can't get it out of the deployment zone this way. So when I say terrain makes a big difference, look at these maps, right? This map here, right here, is under WTC, is considered light terrain. All of these here are L-shaped ruins that block line of sight. All of them. How the fuck are you meant to move around that? So when I say, oh, I'm playing on WTC terrain, and I say it's quite dense, I want you to fucking appreciate the shit that I had to play on that weekend. Next time you hear a tournament report, and I'm like, yeah, so it's WTC terrain, so it's quite dense, I want you all to just fucking show me a little bit of sympathy, alright? Because imagine trying to shoot people on this fucking table. Look at that board. So it's got some good bits to like it's got like some good bits to like deploy in, but it's heavy because of how dense it is in the middle. Exactly, Kyle, exactly. So this is why I talk about local meta so much. This is very important for like competitive analysis. Local metas make a huge difference, because you can have lists that because of the terrain that's really used. Terrain, and so those kind of because terrain shapes everything. Terrain shapes the local meta, and the biggest factor of local meta, more so than the armies that are actually used, is the terrain, because the terrain will determine which armies people are likely to bring to a tournament. I know that sounds crazy. Most people, you might think, oh, some people just bring what they've got. And yeah, that is the case. But a lot of people will tweak their list or should tweak their list based on terrain. Black Templars are probably the best Marines consistently week in, week out. They are. Sometimes you get some armies which do better than them, but it's only temporary. Black Templars consistently clock in one of, if not the top, best Space Marine chapters right now. And they're doing it without Ironstorm Spearhead. I mean, Ironstorm is good, and to be clear, the last 2 weeks, Ironstorm has had the highest win rate out of the Black Templar detachment that they're using, but it's not the most popular. Ooh. So you're seeing some people that are using the Gladiator Task Force, and they're getting some good results with it, which is really, really cool. And you're seeing some people using Ironstorm, and they're consistently getting good results with that as well. But it's so, so cool to see that Black Templars are like, we know what is good. Fuck that. We're going righteous motherfucking Crusaders. I love it, boys. Yes, kill Braeburn! Kill Braeburn! Yeah, it's great to see that Black Templars are doing well, because they're my personal favourite chapter, so I'm super biased towards them. And also, it's great to just see that they're doing well. They're one of the only chapters that is getting results with their like fluffy attachment. But the thing about Righteous Crusaders is it's very flexible. It's a little bit like Invasion Fleet. It lets you take on a bit of everything. Nice. We then have Grey Knights, which just I don't know how Grey Knights are still doing so well. They're kind of like the exception to the rule, because they've got one fucking tactic, and they're still doing that tactic. And it's the easiest tactic in the world to counter, which is screening. And they've got no anti-tank in a meta of tanks. And yet, they're still pulling in, every so often, they're still pulling in 51%. I think I know what this is. For those that don't know, Grey Knight's whole thing is that they score well but don't kill anything. Or they don't kill a huge amount. So all of their close combat is basically like strength 6 weapons now. All of their units have basically got bolters, and all their infantry caps out are like, you know, even their shooting doesn't cap out very high at all. And then they've got, so they've got loads of infantry with okay combat and okay shooting, but really no anti-tank there whatsoever. Even their vehicles, like their Dread Knights, cap out like strength like 10 in the majority of cases. And their number one, so they don't do any damage, kind of like Tyranids. But the thing is that they can teleport. So at the end of their opponent's turn, they can pick 3 units, put them into reserve, and then when they go, then straight away they go into their turn, and they can drop them down, you know, like normal from Deep Strike. And so they're constantly like popping up, going down, popping up, going down. And if you move near them, they have a stratagem where they can pop in the sky. So they do 3 units, so they can potentially go up and down, like with 4 units in a battle round, which is really, really cool. Similar to what Necrons could do with the Hypercrypt cult. But it's the one tactic they've had. One tactic. It's not changed since the beginning of the edition. So we're 8 months in. It's doing better than before. I mean, I swear at the beginning of the edition, Grey Knights were down like low 40% in their win rate. At best, sometimes I think they even dipped into the 30s, so I might be misremembering. And now they're like, oh yeah, 47% one week, 51% the next week. Nice. Easy peasy, lads. In and out, 20-minute adventure. I don't know how they're doing it. Maybe it's just skill. This is a damning indictment of the competitive community, that too many people focus purely on firepower and not enough people focus on like playing the game. Because if they did, Grey Knights would be on like a fucking 10% win rate. Alright, next up we've got Tau. No! Damn your eyes! I'm terribly vexed. Week in, week out, edition in, edition out. These fucking blue commie bastards keep having a higher win rate than the Emperor's true finest. Tau are doing very well at the moment because they are exceedingly cheap. Every time I go to build my Tau lists, when I'm thinking about using them for a battle report or I'm thinking about using them for like an ornament or something, it truly staggers me how much I get in my list. In many cases, I feel like Tau not only match guard unit for unit, but actually exceed guard unit for unit. Like, they, you know, if we're bringing like 4 tanks, they'll bring, you know, we're bringing 4 tanks, one of which is like big, like a Rogue or Dawn, they're bringing 5 or 6 hammerheads, riptides, big shit, little shit, all up and down. Yeah, Tau just, they feel so undercosted at the moment, and I feel like it's, you know, it's translated naturally into a lot of wins. Yeah, I agree, Derek. Their tanks really aren't that reliable, but they have so many of them. They've got a 51% win rate because they've got a good amount of data to draw upon, and they can cram a hell of a lot into the list. So we've got Death Guard. Death Guard coming in at 53%. Death Guard are on the ascendancy. They really, really are on the ascendancy, and I'm not surprised. I used them this week. It'll be coming out in this week's battle report, and I found them to be so powerful. Plague Marines, possibly the best infantry in the game right now. They have firepower, combat, everything, and they're not super durable, but you stick them in a Rhino and they're amazing. They just hit hard, and they can be more durable than you expect with things like the minus 1 to hit modifier. Yeah, Death Guard are really in the ascendancy now. World Eaters, similar fucking vibe, man. Good numbers, not quite as many as Death Guard, but the World Eaters haven't been an independent faction for as long. I mean, Death Guard were in the starter box for a lot of 8th edition. Yeah, for a lot of 8th edition, so they had a decent foundation there. And they're getting 54% win rate, and again, they're getting 6 wins. I mean, that's really impressive. 33% of their players, roughly, maybe 30%, are going 4-1 or more. World Eaters, they run at you and they chop you up. What's astounding me is that World Eaters, I feel like, have done well into Custodes this week. Normally, whenever Custodes do well, World Eaters do badly. I think we saw that last week. So the fact that World Eaters are doing so well this time, it's pretty cool. But you know what it is? It's once again, it's Demon Primarch and shit shoved into Rhinos. Are we back in 5th edition with where everyone's Rhino rushing each other? Maybe, holy shit, maybe if those Blood Angel players stopped messing around with their jetpacks and shoved everyone back inside of Rhinos, they'd do better. Maybe that actually makes a lot of sense for Blood Angels. I don't mean to tell them how to suck eggs, but if you've got a unit that's fast and choppy, but kind of fragile and can't get across the board, do you know what you need to do? Jump on a fucking Rhino. Then it's fast and choppy when it gets out the Rhino, and also it's pretty fucking durable. Likewise, speaking in a similar vein, Drukhari. Drukhari, and again, it's all Sky Splinter Assault. You've got a couple of people that are letting the side down using Real Space Raiders. But Drukhari, this is another week. Really, when you look at it, the Drukhari win rate is not 54%, it's 58%. I think Sky Splinter Assault is 50+% win rate every week on average. I wouldn't be surprised that settles into around 51-52%. It may go higher. But basically, it's. I mean, look at this. It's the same stuff again. Same as World Eaters. Same as Death Guard. Take shit, put in transport, drive transport forward, jump out, shiv them. We're seeing 3 factions here in the top 10, which are all basically doing the same tactic. And I myself have had a lot of experience with Mech Guard, which is not jumping out and shiving people, but it's shoving shit into chimeras. And I would say that my most successful, outside of Pure Infantry Guard, my most successful Guard army that I've run in 10th edition consistently was Mech Guard. I think that Mech, a lot of people are focusing on like tanks and tank-like things. I think mechanized is the key to 10th. Starting to see some factions that take advantage of it. Obviously, there are some factions which, you know, make a fucking mockery of that theory. But we're seeing a lot of factions that are really benefiting from meching up and are being rewarded for meching up. I wonder if we're moving away from a tank meta towards, not for every faction, but for a lot of factions, their independent meta, what works for them as a faction. I wonder if we're going to see more people move towards mech. Be interesting to see if people can make something happen with mech Tau. Interesting. Can't really do mech Stodes and stuff, but we might see some stuff happen with mech Votan. We might see some Space Wolves have got cavalry, so they don't really need that with Stormlands. But you know, maybe, you know, maybe Chaos Space Marines, if they're struggling to find their niche again, maybe moving away from the giant Abaddon blob, meching up could work. Regular Space Marines meching up a little bit could work. The reason why mech is good because it allows you to take advantage of 10th edition where vehicles are tough. It allows you to take advantage of primary and allows you to protect you, by protecting your troops. And often you can get some half decent troop choices, which can get some decent special weapons. I think it will depend on the faction. Like, you know, Death Guard gets so many special weapons, and World Eaters get so much choppy. But basically, shoving loads of special weapons and choppy inside transport seems to be doing some good work for multiple different factions. Thousand Suns. Turns out that if you shove Magnus into your list, you get a 55% win rate. Nice. Like I said last week, Thousands are a little bit of a blind spot for me. I don't encounter them very often, but when I do encounter them, it does seem to be that Magnus is doing some hard lifting, and all the Demon Primarchs in general seem to be doing very, very well at the moment. Thousand Suns, 55% is wildly high. But then there's a few factions this week which are wildly high. I wonder if it's the quirk of the quiet week. I don't think Thousand Suns were that high last week. The one thing I can say with Thousand Suns is every time I have seen them in action, there's been Magnus, and I want to say Scarab Occults, but I'm not 100% confident in that second one. I don't see a lot of rubrics anymore. I used to see a shitload of rubrics. Rubrics and flamers every day of the week. I don't see that so much now, which is interesting. Then we get to, truthfully, the most powerful army in the meta right now. Necrons realistically are number 1. Okay, like, you might say, but Mordian, they're not. They're only 4th. Necrons are realistically number 1. They have got, so there's a few things to mention. Firstly, they've got very, very high player numbers. They have 50 players in total, getting 142 wins out of 257 games. 8 people, that is almost 20% of their people, going the distance. And they've got a 55% win rate. And they have won 3 tournaments since the balance patch, which is actually the most out of any faction. In fact, it's almost 20. It's more than 25% of all the tournament wins that we've had. Okay, so there's a lot. There's a lot of, well, not an average, just sort of since this 4-week sort of since the data slate to the balance patch kind of thing. So they've won a lot of this weekend. Oh, just the weekend tournament wins. Okay, so out of 11 tournaments, they've won 3 of them. So this week they won 25% of the weekend tournament win. The most important thing when doing the stats is knowing about artificial inflation and artificial suppression of win rates. If you have a faction that's very, 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 very popular, then its win rate and its win rate is above 50%, then its win rate will actually be much higher than that, but artificially suppressed by as much as 5%. Necrons are probably actually on a 60% win rate. Now the reason for that is the mirror match. If you get Necrons versus Necrons, then that counts as both a win and a draw for the faction, which brings it closer to 50%. So with them being so popular, with them making up 10% roughly of the player numbers this week, it means that 10% of the games that involved and potentially ended in a that's probably not right at all, but there's a lot of chances for Necrons to play each other. I would argue that Necrons are actually 58 to 60%. That's the win rate. Now, when we look at the different legions that people are using, we're seeing a lot of people go with Canoptech Court, which I believe is the power grid one. which is decent because it gives you good damage output with lots and lots of rerolls and stuff. But Hypercrypt is the clear winner. You had 18 people go Canoptic Court with the 52% win rate, but only one of them was able to go the distance and win a tournament. Very, very easy to understand why Hypercrypt Legion is so powerful. It increases the Necron's movement, and movement wins games. Now, why does movement win games? Because movement allows you to get onto objectives. Movement allows you to bring combat units into combat quicker. Movement allows you to get the drop on your enemy with shooting units. Movement allows you to score secondaries. Movement allows you to get into primaries. Movement is the most important stat and the most important factor in determining which armies are going to win. There's always exceptions that prove the rule, but personally, it's why I believe that it's another factor why I think mechanized armies do very well in this meta, and it's also why I think armies like Votan, if they're not overly mechanized up, will never, ever get a hugely high percentage win rate unless they're massively overtuned in terms of power. The number one thing that will determine whether a faction is going to win or lose is going to be movement. We've got a few weird ones in here. Now, I think, if I'm going to be absolutely honest, I think the top 3 is an anomaly. I think it's an anomaly. I think I said this a few times tonight, but I can't stress enough. I think it's one of those weekends. The fact that we've got multiple factions that are well over 50%, the fact that we've got multiple factions that are over 60% is unusual, and the fact that both of those factions are ones that don't normally do this well. It makes me. It feels like because it's a quieter weekend, and maybe we've got a few smaller events that we're seeing a bit of influence from the local meta. We've got a GT, a big GT in Canada, and then a 51 player in Kansas, and then we've got 50 players in Spain, Switzerland, and Hungary, and Vasterbotens, and Canada again, and Phoenixville, and Krakow in Poland, and in America again. So interestingly, do you know what's really, really cool about this? There wasn't any events that took place that were recorded on the Meta Monday data this week from the UK. And so I think that does explain a few of the weird and wacky and wonderful results, because we're seeing the global meta, not just the UK meta, we're seeing the global meta. Now, Chaos Knights coming in with 18 players, which is a very, very strong showing, with 51 players winning 89 games, 2 players going the distance, but no tournament wins, 57% win rate. I don't think I've ever seen a faction that has such a high win rate. I'm going to say that again in a moment. I don't think I've seen a faction before with a high win rate which didn't get a tournament win. So you would look at that figure and you'd go, Knights are doing amazing. You'd see that 2 people actually went 4-1. You'd be like, Knights doing amazing, and yet they didn't win a tournament. It's Chaos Knights are very similar to Imperial Knights. Like, obviously, they're a bit of a stat check. I do think that I personally feel like Chaos Knights are more powerful than the Imperial ones, because the Chaos Knights always seem to be hitting on fucking 2s, and they can walk through walls, whereas the Imperial Knights seem to generally hit on 3s and can't walk through walls. I think it's because the Imperial Knights are less specialized. Like, the armature is it's a bit choppy, but it's still mostly shooty, whereas the Chaos Knights or the armature Helverin's like a bit of Daka. The Chaos Knights seem to be pure chopper or pure Daka, and so and because of which you got the pure Daka ones that hit on 2s, and you got the pure chopper ones that hit on shooting, but are terrible in combat, and the pure chopper ones which are the other way around. Yeah, Chaos Knights it's just a bit of a stat check, really, isn't it? Did you bring enough anti-tank? Yes. And so this stat actually makes perfect sense to me, because you had a lot of players that sort of dominated their way up the mid board. And then you had 2 people that got to the final, played on the top table, and played against someone who's got an overtuned faction, which has an advantage tank, and beat them. You know, I just said I've never seen a faction with such a high win rate with no tournament wins. Well, Sisters just went and went, you know what? You said it once, we're going to do it again. 62% win rate. 6 players, almost 50% of their players, going 4-1. And yet none of them translated that into a tournament win. And it hasn't 100% landed yet. But this is 2 weeks where sisters have been towards the top. One of them in a very big week. One of them in a quieter, maybe slightly more interesting, sort of meta-wise sort of week. Sort of interesting locations kind of week. But still, if you're whether you don't look at the individual weeks, look at how they're doing overall. Sisters are now consistently performing at events. Definitely a faction to watch. Maybe even the Inheritors. Necrons are probably like the true Inheritors. We're seeing them translate a lot of stuff. But Sisters, I feel like Sisters are kind of falling into that position that Chaos Space Marines are in for a while. Really, really good. People are putting a lot of effort into working them out, but it's just taking time to find the absolute secret sauce. And then we get to the top. Admech. Yeah, bit of a weird one. Bit of a weird one. Very, but surprisingly easily explained. Low player numbers. You find, well, except with Deathwatch, you find that factions with low player numbers tend to have huge fluctuations. I wouldn't be surprised if next week Admech are in the toilet. You had, they're just 5 players, and that just means that there was just this 1 week where it was a little bit quieter. The events were maybe a little bit more local. The messages were maybe a little bit more different. And please, I want to be clear. I'm not being arrogant by saying because the UK wasn't involved, the meta wasn't proper. No, the meta is proper. I hope you guys know that. I've said this many times. Local meta is very, very important, and it shows how you can have these variations. And the game might, the game might look one way in one location, be very different in another location. That's why we've said this phrase, like the Australian meta. A lot of people go, oh, it's the Australian meta discounted. No, you should not discount the Australian meta. But coming back to, I just want to make that clear because I don't want to think anyone's being like, being a bit arrogant about that. I didn't mean that in any way. But I think what we're seeing here is 5 players and 3 of them did surprisingly well. I think what it showed, but so Admech, but however you slice it, you had 2 Admech tournament wins this week, and you had 3 players that went at least 4-1. So 2 obviously went like 5-0, and 1 player went like 4-1. And then there was like one player went 1-5, but the other guy, obviously overall they've done a 63% win rate. What's holding, and we've said this from the beginning of 10th edition. They have always had a good, at least one good tournament build, at least one. Sometimes 2, sometimes 3, but they've always had consistently. Admech have had this problem of low player numbers, and yet there's always someone every single week that wins a GT somewhere. Somewhere in the world, they win a GT with it. And sometimes it's a little GT, and sometimes it's a very big GT, but there's always someone somewhere who's winning an event with them. And like if we go over to, so they won a 32 player event in Sweden, and they won a 45 player event in the US. So so they won 2 events of respectable size in 2 very, very different locations. If clearly Admech have the way to win, why aren't we seeing people pick up the army? And it's very simple. It's bloody expensive. Now, if we head over to GW for a moment,
ready to unleash 11 barrels of hell.
We head over to Games Workshop for a moment. Now, let's go down to the Chicken Walkers. The Chicken Walkers. What you need to win, what you need to win a GT with Admech. £37.50 each, and you need 18 of them. I mean, that's £600 worth of Chicken Walkers, and there are fiddly fucking model to build, and they're a fucking fiddly model to paint as well, because all Admech models require a huge amount of detail. Not many people would commit themselves to so many Iron Striders, so many Dragoons, whichever ones that are doing that. I think it's the shooty ones that are doing well. But not many people are going to do that, because why would you spend £600 or like like £600, $800 on an army that in 6 months could be shit? GW comes in and nerfs them, and you can't shift them, you can't sell them, because no one else fucking wants them now. And that's not even your whole army. Like, that's one part. You also need, apparently, like, legions of Skitarii. You to get a competitive Admech army for one build, you're probably looking at a cool grand. Now you go to the Adeptus Mechanicus, and you could basically just buy, like, even if you bought 50 Custodian Guard, which is way more than you're ever going to need, but even if you bought 50 Custodian Guard, it would be a third of the price. So why the fuck would you spend a grand? And that's also committing yourself to a very specific build. And like I said, you probably wouldn't buy all 50. You'd probably go for a little mix, but you guys get the point. You can buy like 30 of these guys and a couple of Terminators, and you're probably sorted for your Custodian's army. And both are equally niche, and yet one is so much cheaper. So that's why you won't see Admech players. You won't see their numbers rise. They're just too fucking expensive. Admech are an example of an entire faction which has basically been priced out, and that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day, because it's not really a meta topic. It's more like a real life GW logistics and things costing, have they gone past the point of things costing too much? But overall, the good news is focusing on the fact that Admech actually can win. You just have to be willing to pull out your wallet. And a lot of people do, some people will do it. And that is the meta this week. It's been a long one this week, boys, but we have discussed lots and lots of different things. All right. But of course, all of that is like my opinion, man. Let me know what you guys think down in chat, or comments if you're watching this afterwards. That's all for now. I am tired, so I'm going to go to sleep. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's stream, and of course, as always, see you guys next time. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian Glory Hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier patrons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Marcus Roberts, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Wolf, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.